we started Dead Air Live in November of '74. You know, Dead Air, and we said yeah, and we wanted to do it live, so hence the name Dead Air Live. We did was that we just take an image like this and move it around, and think just different crazy effects, anything to win. Direct me spinning around his head like a halo, and we get response though. People like the show, you know, who will call in, and we had different people call in. I think there was one guy called the radio.
Expands your mind?
Yeah.
It blows my mind.
Welcome to Dead Air Live. My name is Laura Barrett, and I'll be hosting tonight's program on Neighborhood Crime Watch, A Light in the Dark. For many city residents throughout the country, crime is their #1 concern. Every day the newspapers and the news are filled with stories about gang shootings, about violence, about house breaks, about beatings, about other horrible things that happen in our daily lives in this country. It's enough to make a lot of people want to hide behind their triple locked doors and pretend the whole problem should go away. But our guests on tonight's program recognize that hiding does not make the problem going away, and that there is something productive people can do right in their own neighborhoods to help cut down on the problem of crime, and at the same time to bond the neighborhood together more closely. What that program is, it's the Neighborhood Watch program, also known as the Neighborhood Crime Watch program. And on tonight's program, we're going to look at how that works and also explore and talk about National Night Out, which is coming up on August 8th, which is a celebration of these Crime Watch programs. We'll also have tape footage of the Crime Watch system so that people who watch this program can initiate Crime Watch programs in their own neighborhood. Right now, I'd like to introduce our guest for the first segment. With me is Chris Hayes, who is the director of the Bureau of Special Operations for the Neighborhood Crime Watch program. Welcome, Chris, and thank you for being here. Next to Chris is Sue Nathan, who is a coordinator of that same program. And sitting next to Sue is Tanya Smith, who's a member of the Dimmock-Bragdon Neighborhood Watch program, a newly formed group. Thank you all for being here tonight. Chris, I'd like to direct my first question to you and just have you describe briefly the origins of the Crime Watch and Neighborhood Watch programs.
Crime Watch it probably goes back further than any of us want to believe, and it was what existed on the streets in most of our cities in the country, where you had extended families on the street. Everybody watched out for everybody, people knew everybody, you could visit, come and go with safety because people were concerned about one another. What we try to do in Neighborhood Watch is to begin to identify if there is fear on your street, or if there is actual crime on your street, or if you want to prevent crime from coming on your street in the future. And that's the beginning phases of a neighborhood watch on your street. No magic, very simple formula of getting people together, getting people to recognize that there is strength in numbers, getting people to realize that by learning how to move the system, that they can reduce fear, reduce crime, and make not only their street safer, but their lives much, much more rich, because they've begun to develop that extended family on their street where they live.
So, since you and Chris both work for the city in this program, why is it that nowadays city workers, in some ways employees, public employees, have to go to neighborhoods and tell people sort of how to be neighbors with each other, whereas in the old days, as you're describing, Chris, people did that naturally? What's changed about the world in the 1980s?
Well, I mean, I think that part of it is lost, that neighborhood feel. We've because of an increase in crime and fear, we tend to stay behind our doors. We give each other the city nod. You know, I recognize your existence, but I don't have anything to do with you. We're trying to break that barrier to get to say, you have something at stake here. your neighbor is your ally. We just have to reintroduce that for whatever the reasons, the crime and the fear, to let people know if you're different from me, it's okay. We all live on the same street, and that's the only way they can get united to fight crime.
An important piece of that is that there's no one that's listening to this program that doesn't have a new person on the street they live on or the neighborhood they live on. I can guarantee you that any place practically in this country. So we have to bring them back together, get them out of their cars, get them away from the fronts of their TV sets, and start to get them mingling together as family on that street.
So it's partly because we're so much more of a mobile society where people move around from year to year, that people just don't know their neighbors.
There's, 70% of women are working now. When I was a kid, maybe it was 20%. So that's a big difference. So that was a natural crime watch in most of the neighborhoods, the mothers that stayed home. Now women are out working as well as raising their families. So you have to do something a little bit different in these neighborhoods.
Tanya, would you say it's true in your neighborhood that, as a matter of course, the neighbors don't necessarily know who their neighbors are, don't know them by name, or is your neighborhood a little more tightly knit than that?
Ours is a little bit tightly knit than that because basically everybody in our complex knows each other, including the new people that move in.
Is this a public housing complex, or?
No.
So it's just but it's a series of buildings where it really is a neighborhood unto itself within the city of Boston where people seem to know each other?
Right.
And do the people generally get along in a neighborly sort of a way in your complex?
Yes.
So in some sense, there's already a feeling. Do people, prior to having a Crime Watch program formally set up, did people keep an eye out for each other's property?
Yes. Basically, yes.
Is the idea behind forming a Crime Watch program to get them to do that in a more active way, or why did you decide that you needed something with a name to it?
We formed the Crime Watch because of the fact that in certain areas where we live, the crime was filtering down into our neighborhood. So in order to stop it from getting out of hand, we had to form Crime Watch because there started to be break-ins and drug dealers, and so in order to protect the children in the neighborhood, we decided to form Crime Watch.
So this was almost more of a preventive measure. I mean, you saw that crime was coming into your neighborhood and you wanted to keep it from getting worse.
Right.
And what has been your experience so far? Have people come together and thought this was a good idea?
Most of them have.
Other neighbors are resisting it?
Basically, yeah. Because we started from building to building, and then it grew into a bigger one.
It isn't always numbers that you're worried about. You can't always worry about those that are not involved. You worry together with those that are involved. And even if you on your street only have me, one more person watching out for you, you've doubled your strength. So the fact that there's another 50 people on that block really doesn't matter. We keep trying to work to get them involved. But at least initially, you can double, triple, sometimes as much as 50 or 100 times your own strength, and that's only a small portion of the street. And we know we're not going to get everybody for whatever reason. You're too busy, you've got young children at home, you're afraid. You don't want to get involved, you don't give a damn, whatever. So we go with that portion of the block, as many as we can get involved, and we bring them together and work with that segment. So numbers are not as important as the kind of mentality that you make a difference.
We're going to see a segment later on tape of a Crime Watch meeting, but maybe, Sue, if you could just describe for a minute, what would happen if you were sitting in your office one day and a resident called and said, there's a lot of crime in my street, some of us neighbors want to do something about it, where do we go from here?
Well, the first thing I would suggest is if they'd feel comfortable having a meeting in their home, to invite the people they were comfortable with on the street. We'd supply flyers to them, giving the date and the location of the meeting, and either Chris or Jerry Smart or myself would be the speaker. At that point, we'd have them leaflet the neighborhood, and we'd come out and take it from there. Have people, and it's wonderful at a first meeting, you have people who've lived on the same street for years and really have never known one another. people moving in, knowing that, 3 generations of this house. So there's a coming together, it's a sharing of information. A lot of times people don't know the woman down the street was broken into or mugged. So you're pooling your information and setting a foundation. What's going on the street? Let's find that out first. So that's basically how it would start.
What would be the typical turnout to a first meeting?
From 1 to 40.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
yeah, it's
I might
amazing.
come to your house and you may be the only one there.
Really?
That's not discouraging. That's the beginning.
Right.
And then we work with you until you have some kind of a solid group on that street, however small or however big.
Mm-hmm.
One last question is, what is the ongoing commitment then? If let's say I came to this first meeting, but I think, well, I'm a busy person, I'm not sure how much time I have to give to this. What's the commitment? Is it really as much or as little as you want to give?
I can tell you on the block I live on, we've had a crime watch for 18 years. We have 2 meetings a year. One is a meet your neighbors evening meeting, and one is a dessert meeting, again, to meet the neighbors. And that's where we do all our networking and all our linking up and all our feeling and touching and hoping on that street at those 2 meetings. So it can be a very minor commitment. It can be shared by a dozen people on the block. We don't care. We just want that street to feel a little bit safer, and actually we find they do make the street safer when they get together.
Well, thank you very much. We'll be coming back to some of these studio guests, and we'll be bringing new guests on. But right now, we'd like to go to a tape that's on National Night Out, which is a program coming up on August 8th. So let's go to that tape.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Superintendent Joe Carter from the Bureau of Special Operations. The Boston Police Department has several awards to give out to individuals who've done a great job in assisting the Boston Police Department, and particularly the community, in crime prevention efforts and neighborhood crime watch in general. The first award will be presented by the Commissioner. It's going to Mr. Edward Brooks.
Hey Ed, I'm going to read this with you. Just shake hands there. Thanks very much. Folks, I just want to read this, please, to bear with me. This is the Boston Police Community Service Award to Edward Brooks. In recognition of your outstanding contributions to improving the quality of life through active participation and commitment to neighborhood crime watch in the city of Boston. Given under my hand this day, congratulations, Ed. This guy has been around for a long time, a friend of the young people and the seniors, a real advocate against crime and drugs. We're very fortunate to have him in the city.
My baby, seems like a mighty long time. My baby, shabba, shabba, 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 my baby. My baby, only once more, and you will want to let you go away before. One fine day, you're gonna want me for your girl.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to National Night Out in Mattapan Square. Let's give a round of applause for everybody. To get the program on the road, I'd like to introduce to you His Honor, the Mayor of the City of Boston, Raymond Flynn. Mayor Flynn.
Hello, everybody. Let me congratulate all of you for turning out here tonight. Your presence here really indicates to the entire city that you really care about your neighborhood and you're going to do something about it. You are active people in your community, and that's the reason why Mattapan Square is such a strong and healthy neighborhood. We're very, very proud of the work that you're doing, and our police department and all the neighborhood services want to work very, very closely with you, because we want to make sure that you have a strong and healthy neighborhood. So tonight's also a special night to pay tribute to some of the people in your neighborhoods who have done such good work. And we're going to praise them and we're going to salute them for their efforts. So on behalf of all the people of the city of Boston, let me thank you and the committee for the wonderful job that you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor Flynn. Our next speaker is your Police Commissioner Francis Roach.
Thank you very much. Boston is effective. The Boston Police Department is effective because of you. Sincerely, you must know what's happening. I am the luckiest person in the country. What you're doing for the police department is amazing. We're working together. We're treating each other with mutual respect. But what you're doing in the Crime Watch area is significant. Significant. We're making a difference, and I want to take an opportunity now to thank you from the bottom of my heart, because you make my job easier, but more importantly, it's a great city. We want to keep it safe. Thank you. Let you go in the still of the night, in the still of the night.
Welcome back to the studio. For those of you who just tuned in, that was Mayor Ray Flynn singing, and this program is on Neighborhood Crime Watch programs. I will reintroduce our guests for those, again, who just tuned in. On my left is Chris Hayes, who's director of the Neighborhood Crime Watch Program's Bureau of Special Operations, and Sue Nathan, who is next to Chris, works with him in that same department. And a new guest on for this segment is Police Officer Norman Hill, who's a community service officer in Area B, which is in Roxbury in Boston.
Sure.
Welcome for coming here tonight. In reference to that tape, maybe, Chris, you could give us a little more information about what exactly is coming up on August 8th, and if people want to participate, what they should do.
August 8th is a celebration of the Crime Watch, the power of Crime Watch, and I believe it grew initially out of a group of women that got out in a park in Boston and in a park in New York and actually took back the park after a rape had taken place in both of those parks. They had small candles in their hand and they lit up the night. They took back the park and they said that they would make that park safe that night no matter what. And they did that. And that's grown in 6 years from that handful of women to include last year over 7,000 communities in the country and almost 20 million people. And the expectation is that it will go as high as 73 to 7,500 communities in this country, and maybe 25 million people will actually get out and do something that night to make their street a little bit safer. Sit on their doorsteps, light a light, meet a neighbor, speak to an old person, speak to a young child, whatever. Just to do something that night. Beside that, we have a lot of events, citywide events that are taking place in Boston that night. We expect between 250 and 300,000 people in Boston to be affected by National Night Out this year.
That's an impressive showing, and I think we'll be able to show a phone number periodically throughout the program that people can call if they want more information. Officer Hill, what is the crime that people are so afraid of that forces them to form these kinds of groups? You see it on the beat every day. How bad is it out there?
Well, it depends on the neighborhood, really. I think the overall concern in neighborhoods in the city of Boston, as well in cities throughout the United States. I think the major issue is drugs. Is it really bad out there? Is it really bad as the media portrays it to be? Definitely not. If you were to listen to the media, you would think that there are certain segments in the sections in the city that it's a war zone. Well, actually, it's not. You would think that there are more bad people versus good people, and actually, there are many more good people than bad.
Okay, well, that's a positive slant on it. So you're trying to harness the energy of these good people to keep the bad people from taking over their neighborhoods.
That's right, to put fear, to take fear and place it to people that are bad, to the bad people.
That's probably one of the key things what Norman says, fear. People fear crime more than actually are victims of crime. And so we have to really
Reduce the fear.
reduce that fear. In many, many cases, that's the beginning of you feeling you're in a safer neighborhood.
Sue, as a woman, do you think that there's greater fear on the part of women? And are they the backbone of Crime Watch programs, or is it pretty equally divided between men and women?
I'd say it's very, very equally divided. In some cases, I mean, it's men who are initiating the program for the street, but I don't think you could peg it a male or female. I think men and women have the same fears today, and they're doing something about it.
Kind of an important piece of that. Every major police department in this country now has some form of outreach program for Crime Watch. Practically every major police department in the world, including in Japan, where we think has very little crime, they have 500,000 crime watchers there. In England, Scotland Yard has completely revamped their way of policing neighborhoods by actually going out and recruiting neighborhood people to be their eyes and ears and assist them in dealing with fear and dealing with crime. So when you take in Boston a commissioner saying he wants a crime watch on every single street in the city, that's a terrific statement to people to get involved. And we're going to stay at it until we do get into every single street and reduce the fear on those streets.
Officer Hill, do you think it would really make your job easier or change your job in any way if every street in the city did have a Crime Watch program? And how would it make your job easier if that's true?
Absolutely. The police cannot be everywhere, and usually people can be. If every street had a crime watch, they could be our eyes and ears. They could look out their windows and see what is happening. They could dial 911 or dial the district station and have the police respond to suspicious activity on their street. So I agree that it would be our advantage and the advantage of those people who live on the street to form crime watch groups.
I know that some residents feel like, well, even if I call in a crime, the city doesn't have the capability to respond adequately to these problems. You know, that they say with budget cuts, now the local aid's being cut to cities, are there enough police officers to really respond if people were calling in every crime that they saw?
Well, if people were to call in for any crime, I guarantee on Area B anyways that they would get an answer one way or the other. So to say that police activity is going to be hampered by budget cuts, I don't know if there are going to be police officers cut or not. I can't answer that. But if they were to call in a suspicious activity to Area B or to any other police station in the city of Boston, I just about guarantee that they would get some kind of response.
But clearly, one of the things that happens on a neighborhood watch is you act as a deterrent to crime. You start to reduce it because you have concerned people looking out their window. You have concerned people that will come to the aid of people that are being attacked. And the basic unit that we always talk about is calling 911 to make sure you have the police coming. But there's no way that you can stand by if your child is being attacked outside your door, or your wife, or your brother, or sister, or father, or mother. So you are the first line. You're the victim of the first line. And when you can get assistance from your neighbors, and you can also train people of the necessity of calling the police to get that backup coming as fast as it can, you absolutely will reduce crime on your street. And I don't care how bad the crime is on the street.
Well, let me ask a sort of philosophical question. Is there any feeling that if a successful Crime Watch group keeps crime out of their neighborhood, are they going to possibly just push it into another neighborhood? I mean, does this get at the root of crime? Does this keep crime from happening, or does it just shift it around?
In some cases, it shifts it around, and there's no question about that. But again, if you take from where we started 4 years ago with only a few crime watch groups in the city, we have 350 of them now, and they're in every section of the city, from East Boston to West Roxbury, from South Boston to Hyde Park, so they're all over the city, and they cross all economic lines and all racial lines, so there's a whole lot of people. We're talking to between 6,000 and 10,000 people a year, involving them in the crime watch in a very significant way. So yes, you do some shifting, but importantly, as Norman said, police cannot be everywhere. Many of the people on these watch streets, where there's a watch on the street, give us information that it would take the police forever to discover, because the operation of selling drugs in many cases is so sophisticated that it's only you in that building that knows what's going on. And that's the kind of eyes and ears that make this thing an incredible success.
It's my sense that a lot of the crime that's committed is committed by young people. Is there any way to involve young people in these crime watch programs, maybe very young people, so that they will have more of a neighborhood sense and realize that maybe when they get older and are thinking about turning to crime, that they don't want to prey on their neighbors anymore because they really know their neighbors a lot better?
Could we hold that to the next segment with
Sure.
Pat Spence? She's got a dynamite story.
Oh, okay. I would love to ask her that then. We have
Okay.
another guest coming on who I guess has a specific story in that. In terms of some of other success stories from Crime Watch, what have people been able to accomplish? Do they actually see crimes in action and report them, or is it just that their presence out there keeps the crime from occurring?
Sue had.
Well, it's both. One, sure, they're watching crime, they're reporting it, but also they're preventing crime. I had a situation in Mission Hill a couple years ago, a series of rapes in the neighborhood, and we had just formed a crime watch group, and a woman was coming home late at night from the hospital. She was a nurse, felt someone behind her, wasn't sure, was scared. She had a whistle. We had distributed whistles on the street. She blew that whistle. Within 30 seconds, 12 of us were out on our doorsteps, on our porches, blowing whistles, creating confusion, coming to her aid. That night, about 28 calls went into 911, reporting someone blowing a whistle on the street and that someone was in trouble. We didn't catch that person, but the rapes stopped and that person took off. Whoever it was, she didn't know if it was the rapist or what it was, but she felt at risk, and we came to her aid. So yes, we prevented some crimes.
I think you raise a good point when you say that you blew a whistle, or the woman blew a whistle in the neighborhood. People came out, and that is, maybe Officer Hill, you could address this, that if you see a crime in action, let's say you see somebody actually being hit, beaten, assaulted outside. Let's say you're a pretty strong guy. Your natural impulse is to maybe go out and intervene. Is that something you would advise that they should do or shouldn't do, and what should people do?
Well, it depends on the circumstance, it depends on the situation, it depends on the individual. Every instance is different. Most people have to be aware that there are those out there on the street involved in suspicious activity that do carry guns. That's one thing certainly that you have to keep in the back of your mind. You have to weigh each situation differently. I can't really give a yes, you should go out, or no, you should go out answer to that.
But rule of thumb,
Yep.
always call 911.
That's right.
Always call 911, and if you do that, at least you've got some control over the situation as it develops. Is there a risk involved if you go out the door?
Absolutely.
There's absolutely a risk. In all of the crime watch groups we've had in Boston, and on the one I've had on my street for 18 years, and we've had a lot of crime on the street where I live in the South End, in every single instance, no one was hurt in those instances. But if I run out the door tonight because somebody has you down on my sidewalk, I can get killed. I personally will take that risk, and I'm an unarmed civilian that works in the police department, and that's how I go out my door, as an unarmed civilian.
Okay, well, we have to go to another tape. I want to make one point, because this program is going to be shown in Somerville, Cambridge, and Boston, and a lot of communities, and they don't all necessarily are plugged into the 911 system. So if you're watching this program in a community such as Somerville that doesn't have 911 as the emergency police response number, you should find out what your local police department's emergency response number is if you're watching this program, and have that number posted by your telephone at all times so that you can call if there's a crime that you witness happening in action. On that note, let's turn to the next, let's go to the next tape, which is on an actual Crime Watch meeting that recently happened in Boston. Let's go to the tape now.
Eventually what we want is this group to be able to run itself. What we're trying to do is to build in a small amount of power or a large amount, whatever you guys want to do, and show you the way to move the bureaucracy of the city, how to get the services that you're entitled to, whether you're getting them or not now. You know the best on that. We try to tailor the Crime Watch to the needs of the street that we come on. Some streets are terribly out of control, some are not so bad, some are pretty wonderful, actually. But all streets should have a Crime Watch, because you never know when incidents are going to start, you never know when a drug dealer is going to move into the neighborhood, and following the drug dealer many, many times you have a whole series of types of crime that you have difficulty in controlling. The easiest crimes that follows the drug dealers usually is the street crime, where you'll start having people being ripped off on the street. The second easiest crime is to break into the homes. The third is to vandalize your cars and to steal your cars. These follow the drug situation very, very quickly into a neighborhood. So what we would rather have is you ready to act very quickly if one of these things develop in your neighborhood. And if they are in your neighborhood, to show you how to get them out of your neighborhood. So if you just introduce yourself, you might want to say how long you lived on the street, and whether or not you've had a crime committed within about a year, because we want to tailor it to today, not to 5 years ago. If you could keep it like that, and while we're doing that, we're going to make sure that the list, the phone list, which becomes the most important communication link between all of you, both day and night, gets circulated around to the group. So, would you like to start?
I've lived here for 27 years. And we had 2 cars broken into. One was stolen in total, and another one was right on the driveway, and it was stolen. Didn't get it because they took the quick lock, and my son caught them in time, but we didn't catch them, but we saved the car. And that's about it.
Were those incidents at night?
Yes, both at night.
Both times at night?
Yeah, his girlfriend's car was stolen right out in front there. They found it 2 weeks later, but it was totaled.
As far as incidents in the past year, about maybe 2 months ago, our car was broken into, but they didn't, we only saw the lock pop, but we heard the alarm go off that night. It wasn't until the next morning that we realized someone had tried to break into it. We thought maybe someone had bumped it, but the alarm had scared them away, obviously. And I saw 2 young people break into what I found out is Mrs. English's house and steal furniture from there. That was probably, I don't know, 2 months ago. And I called the police for that, and I know they ended up talking to you over here about
it. They had asked me who she was.
Yeah. And we have renters on the second 2 floors, so hopefully they'll be either coming here or we'll keep them informed, but we'll put their names on the list as well.
We've been broken into a couple of times. One time last summer while we were sleeping, someone came in and took the keys off the dining room table and stole our car. So, and the year before that, they broke in on Mother's Day during the afternoon and stole a lot of stuff from the house. And we asked the neighbors next door if they were home, and they were home and everything, but they didn't hear anything or see anything.
Can I ask you how they got in the house?
Yeah, we...
the first one stayed in the night. How did they come in?
We made a mistake and left one of the windows open, and they popped open the screen and came in the front window.
Okay, one of the things that this Sergeant O'Leary can do is show you how much you can leave the windows open, and can show you a very inexpensive way of pinning them so that you get the air, but the person can't open them.
Yeah.
What you deal with here in this neighborhood is houses that are probably between 80 and 120 or 30 years old. So that little lock on the window is no match for a pry bar. We can show you very simply how to make it almost impossible for the person, short of breaking the window and making a lot of noise. And that would have waked you guys up if they made that noise. So that's a service that you should, and even though you've had it, lightning does strike twice. I mean, I'm not trying to frighten you, I'm just trying to say, take advantage of that. Now, the daytime?
They did just what you explained. The first, they we had the storm window or something was open, and they just broke the window lock.
Okay, storm window keeps out cold air. It does not keep out a criminal. It is not a security window. So people think because they have a storm window they've got another layer of security. They do not. So bear in mind that you have to keep the person out. So you have to take some defensive measures to do that. One of the things that I'm so glad about with you people with your babies here tonight, I have 2 daughters, and they both live where I do in the South End, and when we started our crime watch, they were babies. And between the 2 of them, they have been saved a total of 4 times by concerned neighbors. And in every time and those were all people that were crime watch people that through little group meetings like this had realized that those 2 kids were important to them. Very old people, and in a couple of cases came to their assistance when they were being robbed on the street. So you say, how could an old man in crutches make a difference? He changed the odds, and it stopped the crime. So where were you mugged at?
Right in my backyard, chased me right in the backyard.
Chased you in the backyard?
My son lives in my apartment, one of my apartments, a 3-family house. And we put in a light in our backyard since, and I think it helps a little bit.
Yeah, one of the things we do, we put out a 1-sheet newsletter every month. And there's like 2 or 3 people collect the information, but it's information like that you're better off knowing about, even though it's a little bit frightening, than not knowing about it. And we keep people up with what's taking place on the street, if there's births and deaths or any little, you can fill up half a sheet of paper every month, and we hand deliver that into everybody's door once a month. Some months there's practically nothing in it, but you can talk about, recycling, or you can talk about any of the other type of issues outside of crime. But at least you can keep up with the crime as they start before a pattern sets in here, and to learn to watch for that. The other thing that you can do, and I would strongly encourage this, is to as many of the front porches that you can, light them up. I think things like making sure that the street is clean is a very important thing. If I'm a criminal and I come walking down through your street and I see all the porch lights on, I see the street clean, I see the abandoned cars towed off, that they're not here, that gives me a sense of order that's on your street. And as a criminal, I don't know why I'm turned off about committing a crime there. There's too much order for me. I would rather find a street that had disorder, not have lights on, have broken windows, have cars abandoned where people didn't care, because if you didn't care about that, I think you don't care about me breaking into your neighbor's house. So that becomes kind of an important part of getting the light fixed and insisting that the city or the Edison fix the light. Don't let them off the hook. You guys got a lot of people here tonight. That's a lot of power. Politicians pay attention to power. So you've got the power.
Welcome back to the studio. For those of you who just tuned in, this program is on the Neighborhood Crime Watch program. The main speaker on the tape you just saw was Chris Hayes, who also happens to be a guest here tonight, has been on all 3 segments for the program. Welcome back to the 3rd segment of the Crime Watch program. A new guest on for this segment is Patricia Spence, who is an Alpha Road Neighborhood Association Crime Watch member, and that's in Dorchester. Thank you for coming on, Pat. Okay. And back with us again is Police Officer Norman Hill, who's a Community Service Officer in Area B in Roxbury in Boston. On this segment, we would like to explore both some more aspects of Crime Watch and what that program means, but also broaden the definition of these watch programs and how they extend beyond just looking out after crime, but also trying to build a stronger neighborhood in other ways. And in that sense, Pat, I'd like to ask you, first of all, what your group does, how it came to be, and how you became involved.
We had some of the same problems as all of us have mentioned. The break-ins, chop shops, drug dealers on the street, etc. And that was the original need, for us to come together, understand the problem, and be able to work together as a community to solve some of those problems, which we did fairly quickly. We've expanded from that, though. We call it a neighborhood association. We have a Crime Watch arm. We have our second annual picnic, which was actually this past Sunday, which was very successful. The purpose there being to, again, bring neighbors together, get people talking together. If you can do that, then we will all watch out for each other. We also have something called the Alpha Road newspaper. That brings all the kids in from ages, I would say, 8 to 13. And that is probably some of the most fun that I personally have had as yet. It teaches the kids about the neighborhood. They report on their own street, and the newsletter goes out, or newspaper I should call it, once a month. And they oftentimes are able to interview, I will say, celebrities and other important people. They've done Commissioner Mickey Roach. As of June 27th, they've interviewed people from Channel 7, Lester Strong, Rahima Ellis, and also Stephen Hill from WILD. And they're on to their next person probably soon.
Well, that's so exciting, and I know you brought a picture of some of those children involved in the program when they had just interviewed Commissioner Roach, and maybe you could hold that up to the camera. I had been asking a question earlier about what age people are involved in Crime Watch, and as you can see from the picture, that very young kids, and as you can see from the tape we just saw, even infants can be involved. This is something for the whole family to be involved in.
Absolutely.
Speaking of the whole family to be involved with, I guess some people who might be particularly fearful in neighborhoods would be the elderly on the one hand, and then on the other end of the spectrum, children who are known as latchkey kids. That is, kids who come home from school at 2:30 or 3 o'clock, their parents have to work, they're out of the house, they have to let themselves in. Are the neighborhood watch programs able to help these people, both the elderly and children?
I think the very first thing you start to do on the street by coming together is you start to respect the differences. Then every street has lots of differences, both young and old, and racial, and lifestyles, and language. There's a lot of differences on the street. Yes, the latchkey kid sometimes is not a latchkey kid. He's just a kid on the street, frightened. His mother is down the store. On my street for many, many years, there were 3 very old people. One crippled man sat in the car. The kids could always run to Uncle Al Mercer. They could always run to my father, Papa Hayes, or they could always run to George Fleming. They were there always for those kids to run to if they felt any kind of threat on that street. And the kids did go to them on many, many occasions. So that brings us together as a family.
So it's looking out for, this is sort of a way of institutionalizing or breathing life back into a neighborhood setting where not just these 3 people who might have been there naturally, but in other neighborhoods, if they're not there, everybody will say, well, I'll be willing to keep my eye out for the kid in the neighborhood who maybe has to come home alone.
We like to look at the street and feel that even though we don't have blood relationships on that street like we did way back, we have relationships of caring, concerned people. And that's the key. No magic, just all simple stuff where if you love your neighbor, then you're going to make that a safer street.
I would also say that was the purpose, or is the purpose, of an annual picnic. This was the second one, and it was 5 times greater than the first one. And the comment that all the neighbors made with that, we feel together, we feel we know each other. I met a new person today. I hadn't seen that person for literally a year on the street. The kids were involved, where at times adults might have concerns about some of the things that kids might do on the street. They were all involved. Discussions occurred. All different races, all different ages. They had a wonderful time, and that's important, and that has to continue.
That sounds great. When you were talking about, Chris, blood relations, how you have to look out for people who maybe aren't blood relations, you were also talking earlier before we went on air about the fact that your own blood relations, your daughters, had some personal stories that related to crime and the Crime Watch program. So maybe you can tell us what happened to them.
Well, just very briefly, because again, we live in the middle of the city and we have more crime than a lot of neighborhoods. But on one occasion, my daughter had been followed home from school and was in the doorway when the person attacked her. And the first two people to her assistance was, again, the crippled North of Ireland retired plumber, and in his 70s, and an old Jamaican retired taxi driver. A black and a white man, both in their 70s, came to my 17-year-old blonde daughter's assistant. It was a wonderful coming together on that street. My daughter will never forget that, those two old men coming to her assistance.
That makes me think of two questions for you, Officer Hill. One, do you think that Crime Watch programs can break down racial barriers in a neighborhood? And two, do you think a lot of the crime and problems and tension in neighborhoods is related to race? I guess those are two related questions.
Well, to answer the first one, there are power in numbers no matter what color you are. And I think people who initially form these neighborhood associations realize that right off the bat. Whether it's to stop crime on the street, whether it's to write City Hall for new street lights, snow removal, trash collection, there are always power with more numbers.
And do you think that in terms of the racial issue that, have you seen Crime Watch programs or experienced them help to break down racial tensions in a neighborhood, or do you find that Crime Watch programs tend to be mainly one race in a particular program in a particular neighborhood, or are they mixed racially?
Most of them that I deal with, there are black, white, and there are mixed, depending on what section of the city. You know, it's not the norm to have just black in one group and white in one group. It always seems to be a mixed group.
It reflects the composition of the street.
That's right.
And I think in part of your other question about the crime being committed by racially, I think the criminal sees the color green, and that's in your pocket, and that's what he wants. And he doesn't care, you the victim, whether you're white, black, or Asian, or Hispanic, or what, man or woman, gay or straight. He wants your greenbacks, and that's what he's going to get. So we find that that is not an overriding issue. And definitely, in our neighborhood, we have a large gay population. That has made it's so clear to our kids that we will not tolerate discrimination against that segment of our society that it's a very natural thing. Our kids interrelate very wonderfully with that, and the same with Asian and black and Hispanic in our neighborhood. We do not allow that to take place, any kind of discrimination on our street. And that's the kind of thing that can be duplicated on all the blocks.
Pat, have you found that there are any neighbors who were nervous about joining your association because they felt that maybe they would be considered squealers, maybe they would be somehow marked as people who people would say, oh, we should go out and get this person because they're going to try to turn us in. Did you feel any of that kind of tension?
Yes. Yeah, even I myself have had the same concern being involved. Again, at times it can be a fearful situation. What we've done, though, is many of us, we just keep going to the same people, the same houses. You knock on the door. We've got another meeting coming up this month. Can you come? This is what we're going to talk about. What problems have you had? The point is you just keep trying to involve the people. And with the Neighborhood Association on Alpha Road, the key is we've continued many different activities to draw people in, be it an annual Halloween party for the kids and you get someone else to cook, or be it Christmas caroling, another activity that we do. So those are different ways to pull people in and then have them start working within the Neighborhood Crime Watch program. The minute you bring someone in, they'll meet 5 or 6 people, they'll feel comfortable, they'll come to the next meeting.
Have you found that too in your experience that people have expressed fear, and is it possible to break through that and say you have nothing to fear, this is something to help in the neighborhood?
I think you address the fear realistically, that there is a possibility you'll get hurt. If there is crime or criminal activity on your street, you're getting hurt to begin with. You are having the house breaks, you're losing your kids to the drug dealer, you're having the street crime. We offer a solution that brings people together and begins to change the odds as you as an individual to be a victim. You spread out the power on that block so that you're not isolated. I would certainly rather have the 4 of us together in a block watch than have us all going separate ways, because I'd have 4 times the strength that I have.
As far as Area B goes, I can't recall any incident where, because a person joined a crime watch, that they were victimized. I can't think of anything on record.
What about the aspect of the program that I know some neighborhoods institute, which is for people to actually go out on neighborhood patrols? What does that entail? If any of you can speak to that.
See, there's all levels. We will guarantee you, if there's really terrific fear on that street, we will give you a way to give us information and get it into the proper units within the police department where you don't have to give your name. And in many, many cases, we do that on where streets are totally out of control. Some of the patrols, you have to think in terms of the patrol being out there as a deterrent, as eyes and ears of the police department. Many of them have a way of signaling back again with whistles, or some of them use a cordless telephone. They will call back to a base or walkie-talkies. And the major idea is to notify the policemen and women to come down, a police officer, and you're there as a deterrent. You're not there to confront the criminal. And you're there to deter crime and assist the police. And everything has some element of danger, and we talk about that very realistically at the meetings, so people know in advance that what they're getting into.
Do you think in Roxbury neighborhood patrols, has that happened? I mean, are the neighbors doing that as part of the Crime Watch program in Roxbury?
I can think of one street in particular, I won't name it, that has a neighborhood association that actively patrols the street, but they patrol their streets in their own private vehicles. So the person who is engaged in suspicious activity does not know that they are around, but they are in their cars with walkie-talkies, and when they see this suspicious activity, they communicate to someone who is in their home, and then they dial 911 for the police to engage this person.
On some blocks, we have people sit on the 3rd floor porch.
Right.
Now, that's not an active walking patrol, but it's people patrolling. On others, and the senior citizens, in many cases, do a window watch. They are part of a patrol for that particular neighborhood. And they have actually saved people's lives in many, many, many cases across the city of Boston. Those people that cannot even get out of their houses in many cases, wonderful watches from their windows.
We have several cases of that also, and now that we have a telephone directory that we circulate among the street, I at least know of 2 instances where people saw a car robbery or an attempt where they were able to call the neighbor because they knew the person and had the telephone number, and then obviously call 911, etc. And so that is happening actively.
Yeah. The phone list that she refers to is a key ingredient of the communications that we build into every single watch. It's a phone tree or a phone list, but we just exchange numbers so that you feel comfortable any time of the day or night in calling another person on that street. Again, the basic unit family, you wouldn't feel uncomfortable calling your uncle or your mother. We want to build that into the streets. And when that starts to work on the streets, it's absolutely magic.
It is.
Is there ever any fear that one of the Crime Watch programs might get out of hand and the neighbors take it on themselves to almost be vigilantes? I think of the stories in New York, obviously the famous case where the man shot the kids on the subway because he sort of was taking the law into his own hands. Has that ever happened with the Crime Watch programs, and is it something you try to prevent?
No.
We work very hard to show the people the power in a form of deterrence, not in confrontation. There's a lot of danger in confronting a criminal. If you can deter the crime, even if it moves another block away from you, you've done it safely and you've done it effectively. So everything Pat talks about, the clean street, the picnic, the abandoned car moving it off, it creates a climate that these people are together on that street, that they're organized, that they're orderly. The criminal sometimes doesn't even know why he doesn't commit a crime on Pat Street now. It's because they cleaned the gutters. It's because they got rid of the 6 abandoned cars. There's no drug activity there to speak of now. There's nobody chopping up cars on that street now, so the criminal doesn't know. So it's that kind of deterrence that we work very, very hard, and we've never had a violation of that I know of. And Norman has been in probably as many meetings as I have, and I don't know if you know of any.
We work so closely with community groups, and we educate people in these groups to weigh the disadvantages of acting as a vigilante group in that way. So they know the dangers involved, i.e. these people having guns, and they know the civil liabilities involved of acting out in such a manner.
Is part of the Crime Watch program at all to give people tips on crime prevention? I remember from the tape we just saw, you were sort of talking about different kinds of locks you should have. How much of that is part of the Crime Watch program are, just concrete advice about a deadbolt lock is better than this other kind of lock, and that sort of thing?
That's clearly a piece of it. Basically, you have to get people power before you get lock power. And that's the basic ingredient that we work to have what Pat has created and the people on Alpha Road have created on that street, that they can watch out, they can take care of themselves. Building in all of those secure devices then is something we assist them with. We have a crime prevention officer that comes out to the street with a display of locks, shows them how to inexpensively secure their homes and to make that perimeter where you want to keep the criminal beyond a lot more harder for him to penetrate.
And we've done that twice so far. We've had the officer in, both good attendants. And the nice thing is usually people come from different ends of the street, so 9 times out of 10 they'll tell the neighbor next door what they learned and what they experienced, so it spreads.
Can I just invite every single person that views this tape to do something on August 8th. Show the power of your street. If nothing else, get outside your house, talk to a kid. Rejoice in the fact that you may be preventing a crime by your very presence on that street. And if you do not have a block watch on your street, and I don't care where you live, bring some neighbors together and start to talk to neighbors. Flyer the street, have a cup of tea or coffee with the people, and just come together, because the basic thing is that we are our brother and sister's keepers. And if we work at that, then we'll make our lives a lot safer.
And the symbolic way to show that you're participating is to turn on your porch light, is that correct?
That's one of them. Speak to a kid.
And speak to a kid.
Speak to an old person. Say hello to the guy upstairs that you've been avoiding for the whole 18 months you've lived in that apartment building. Knock on doors. Tell people what's happening in the thing. Introduce yourself.
Well, I think August 8th then is a good short-term goal for people to keep their eye on. We have to close the program, so I want to ask you all briefly to give your own views on ideally what you would like to see as a short-term accomplishment of Crime Watch and crime prevention, and long-term accomplishment. We only have about 1 minute, so first of all, Officer Hill.
For people in all areas of the city to organize street by street, so we have zero crime.
Okay, Pat.
Zero crime.
Zero crime.
And neighbors getting together.
Good?
Yeah, I want us to really make an effort to educate our young people against the dangers of drugs and the terrific amount of violence that there's spinning off of that in the country. And we can do it in a Crime Watch setting, or we can do it individually.
Thank you very much, and that's all we have time for. That was the Neighborhood Crime Watch program. Our guests were talking about ways to prevent crime in our own neighborhoods. And that's all for Dead Air Live.